This story takes place during the summer of 2015. So quite a while ago, while I'm on my shift as an overnight security guard for a small business which I no longer work for. Basically, what I did was drive around an area of about 10 miles to several different businesses that hired us to do patrols, maintenance, alarm checks, and all that good stuff, depending on the wants and needs of each individual business. The job paid decently, and I didn't have to deal with supervisors and other co-workers, so it was a great alone time to look forward to. The first business I would go to that specific night is located in a somewhat remote location just outside of town. Behind it, about 200 feet or so, are some tracks, and across them is a very small hill that leads up to a small residential area. This specific business didn't ask for much other than alarm checks and its doors, so I was never there that long. I was about finished up there that night when I noticed a young man walking up towards the train tracks. Thinking nothing of it, I finished up what I was doing and got back inside my vehicle to do one more drive around before heading home. As I was about to leave, I looked out of my passenger side window and saw that guy was still walking up towards the train tracks. But this time, curious, I decided to drive up towards him and see what he was up to. I watched him walk for a few seconds when he suddenly stopped. At this point, I didn't know what to think. Maybe he was taking a break. Maybe he dropped something. I don't know. It wasn't until he decided to move for about a minute then I began to think something wasn't right. I hurried up and drove over to see what he was doing. Once I was about 50 feet or so away from the tracks, I got out of my vehicle and yelled at him to see if he was alright, but he didn't respond. He just stood there looking down at the tracks. A few seconds later, he suddenly turned around and looked at me. I continued to stand there and yell at him, but he didn't respond. I then put two and two together and was worried that he may be suicidal. I yelled at him again, and he finally answered me. In a low, monotonous voice, he said he was okay. It was then, on instinct, I decided I had to reach out for help. I asked if he wanted help, but he refused, saying that no one could help him. I walked away from him, got out my phone, and dialed 911. I had just got done talking to the dispatcher, who told me that they would send someone out to my location when I turned around to see the guy slowly walking towards me now. I watched as he reached into his pocket and slowly revealed a pocket knife, and after a couple of seconds, he flipped out the blade. At this time, I had no training for dealing with suicidal people, nor have I had any self-defense training, so I didn't know exactly how to respond, but I decided to take a passive approach. As he got closer, his expression didn't change, nor his walk speed. He looked like a robot walking towards me. I backed away a bit and tried to talk to him. I asked him what he was doing, but he didn't respond, not even moving a single muscle in his face, remaining calm. I then asked why he wanted to kill himself and if I could help. He finally spoke and said no, and once again stated that no one could help him in the same low, monotonous voice from before. He then said that he just wanted to die and didn't want anyone to get in his way, not even me. After a few seconds of him walking and me backing up, he stopped, looked in the distance to my right, then back at me before turning around and walking back towards the train tracks, this time at a faster pace. I turned to where he was looking and I saw a car in the distance driving towards our location. As it got nearer, I saw the lights on the top of it. It was a cop, finally. I looked towards the train tracks and saw the guy walking across them. I pointed in his direction at the cop, who was now very close to me, who drove past me and up towards the tracks. I watched as he got out of his car, shined his flashlight towards the tracks, and began to jog up to them while yelling at who I assumed was the guy, while the other officer got out and signaled for me to come up to her. I told her that I was a security guard and was on patrol when I encountered him, and about how he was suicidal and that he was armed with a knife, and at one point approached me with unknown intent. She wrote all this down and spoke over her radio the details I gave. After a couple of minutes, we both watched as the male cop came back across the tracks, but this time not alone. The young man was with him, being led towards us, but now he was handcuffed and still had a non-existent expression on his face, as if nothing was happening. After he was placed in the back seat of the cruiser, not looking at me a single time, the officers and I talked about what happened, and they told me that he would be placed under a psychiatric hold and thanked me for reaching out to them before finally leaving. Once they were gone and out of sight, I gave a strong exhale and began to walk back to my vehicle, all the while feeling relieved that not only I was alright, but the young man was as well, and hopefully is doing a lot better now. I hope we don't meet again under the same circumstances. The year was 1995, and I was 16 years old. I lived in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in a middle-class suburban community with my mother, 2 younger brothers, and our 140-pound Doberman Pinscher. His name was Turbo. From the front door of our house, you could see directly into our living room, which had an open concept floor plan with the kitchen and dining room. Our couch was on the wall directly in front of the front door. It was the summer between my sophomore and junior years in high school. My brothers and I spent a decent amount of time outdoors because this was back when people still did that. I suppose anyone paying attention knew who lived in our house, and I suppose they knew that the only adult was gone when the only car was gone. However, prior to the man showing up at the house, I'd never noticed anything off, and I never noticed anything afterward, so maybe we were just a random target. It was Saturday, and my mom and the boys had run to the grocery store. In Nevada in the 90s, almost no one had air conditioning, so to cool off you had to open all the windows and doors and use fans. On this particular day, I had the back sliding door and the front door wide open to get a cross breeze. Neither screen door was locked. I was napping on the couch in full view of the front door in shorts and a tank top. It's good we gain intelligence with age. In my defense, there was 140 pounds of protective dog muscle on the floor next to me, and probably the only reason I am alive. Around the approximate time I expected my family home from the store, Turbo began barking. Assuming he was barking their arrival, I told him to shush and tried to go back to sleep. Turbo, God bless his sweet protective soul, continued to bark, becoming more and more intense and even aggressive with his barking. Finally, after 5 to 10 minutes of Turbo refusing to be quiet and my family never coming in from the car, I sat up, realizing something was wrong. A man who I didn't know stood, seemingly frozen, staring at my frenzied and barking Doberman. Assuming that the man had some appropriate business at my home, I hurried the 10 steps to unlock the screen door, constantly shushing Turbo. I apologized for my dog and for not hearing his knock. He never knocked. The man explained that he was from the phone company and he was here to check our lines. He never took his eyes off Turbo. Turbo never stopped snarling. I leaned forward far enough to see the street. Only unmarked, privately owned cars lined the street. I looked at the man who was dressed in tennis shoes, jeans, and a t-shirt. I was 16 and dumb enough to nap in front of an unlocked door, but I was no fool. Phone company personnel always wear uniforms, always drive company vehicles, and don't come without being called, and don't work weekends. I looked at the man who had yet to look up from the 140-pound dog that was now foaming at the mouth. I grabbed the screen door handle and held it. This got his attention. Our eyes met. As I said, "You have 30 seconds to show me identification, or I will open this door." I don't even think he made an incoherent excuse as he ran away. I fell to my knees and hugged Turbo. I then gave him all the meat in the refrigerator. I believe with absolute certainty that I would have been attacked if we had not had him. I like to think that if I hadn't had a huge, overly protective dog, I would have been in the habit of locking doors. But what would a screen door latch do against an intruder? And that creep stood there and watched me for 5 to 10 minutes. Perhaps he was paralyzed in fear, but maybe he was working his angles, and only Turbo's insistent display of his willingness to kill anyone who threatens me. That's my theory. Turbo has long passed, but his legacy lives on. And now 2 loving, loyal, and lethal dogs sleep in my room every night. It was around 12:30 a.m., and my dance show had just finished. My mom couldn't get near the theater I was performing at due to traffic, and said I would have to just walk across town to the car where she would be waiting for me. Now, if this was my hometown, it would have been fine, except the show was in a new town where I had never been before, so I know I would have to ask for directions. I picked up my suit bag, which contained all my costumes from the night, and a courier bag containing 6 bottles of water, and went on my way. I crossed the road to the train station opposite and noticed a tall man around 6'7". He was about 60 and wore a long brown trench coat. He had a hat on, and he was smoking a cigarette. Everyone else around me was drunk, so I thought however creepy this guy is the only one capable of giving me correct directions. I approached the man, where he greeted me with a creepy grin. I asked him for directions to the museum, and he told me it's just at the top of the road and I should see it. The road was long, and I knew it would take me some time to get to the top, but if the traffic's bad, what could I do? I walked a little further up the road where I noticed the same man standing outside some Irish bar. He approached me and asked if I'd like to go to a special place with him. Me being a 15-year-old socially awkward teen, just looked at him and smiled as if he was joking, and I tried to carry on walking. This is where it gets creepy. I had a top on that I had worn for the final of the show. On the back of the top was 96. It was a tribute to the 96 lives that were taken in a tragic accident. As I tried to walk away, he grabbed me by this top and pulled me back. He started stroking the back of my top and whispering down my ear, 96, 96, 96. I broke free of his grasp and ran like an Olympian up the road. I was freaked out by the occurrence, but figured the man had gotten drunk in the time it had taken me to walk up the road. I finally reached the top, but could still not see the museum. I stopped a hen party and asked them for directions. They told me it was just through the alley and on the left. I looked at the alley. It was shady and tight. The only source of light was coming from a Chinese shop selling herbs and spices in the center. I walked slowly down the alley when my bag containing my water spilt, and all my water bottles fell all over the street. I started picking them up when I heard the chime of the shop door behind me. I turned, and it was none other than the same damn man. I froze with fear. My mind was saying, "Get the fuck out of here," but my body was frozen. He started walking towards me and whispering in a sinister voice, 96. He repeated, and each time it got louder. Finally, my body went into flight mode, and I ran for my life. He was screaming 96 at the top of his lungs, but I was glad I managed to escape him. I left the alley and came out onto a main road. I finally felt safe. Surely, if he was following me, someone in a car would see. I was texting my friend when I heard a loud shout behind me. I knew instantly who it was. Can this fucker teleport or some shit? I didn't know what to do, but I knew one thing. I didn't want to be buried in my own suit bag, so again I ran like hell, and for the first time he started chasing me. All of a sudden, my mom burst around the corner. "For shit's sake, Laura, I was waiting for you half an hour, and I had to walk up and get you. Get in the car. It's 1 a.m. I turned around and the man had changed to the opposite direction. I don't know what his plans were, or what his special place was. I'm just so glad I didn't have to find out. I told my mother about the strange man, but she just said he was probably going the same way as me and was shouting because he was drunk. She told me I was overthinking the whole thing, but it sure didn't feel that way.
My wife and I stayed in a small rental property in Bath, United Kingdom, this spring. While in bed, I heard the gate to the property open and close quietly. This immediately made me jump up and become alert. I heard someone trying to quickly walk on the gravel walkway to our front door until the motion sensor light came on. I saw a person's shadow dart against the wall outside of our room and instantly went into attack mode. I ran into the kitchen and grabbed a knife from the wooden block and stood at the front door ready to pounce. It was silent for way too long, and then I heard someone running away and the gate slammed. My wife said that once the motion light turned off, the person took off running. I have no idea what their intentions were, but I almost stabbed the hell out of somebody that night. It still gives me goosebumps thinking about it. I had just gotten finished watching Night of the Living Dead and Demons. The Demons movie kinda made me paranoid. I was walking through the hall to get ready for a shower, and I saw something in the mirror that scared the hell out of me. I freaked. Turns out it was just my friend's stupid clown mask. I laughed. Get a grip, girl, I thought to myself. While in the shower, I start hearing faint scratching noises. I didn't pay them any mind. I figured it was just a rat. At the time, the cheap-ass apartment my friend and I stayed in had rats, so hearing noises in the middle of the night was really nothing to be alarmed about. I get out of the shower. I'm naked, water dripping off of me. I grab a towel when I happen to see a man staring at me through the window. I scream. The guy casually stands up. I'm still screaming. He has his ahem thing in his hand. Sick pervert had been jerking off to me the whole time. He smiles, then walks off. I call the police. I don't know if they ever caught the guy, but I never seen him ever again. If I hadn't caught him, he probably would have raped me that night. That was the scariest shit I ever went through. This happened when I was in college. It was about 6 in the morning, still dark outside. I stopped at the gas station to get some gas and a pack of Newports. While I'm pumping my gas, this guy comes up to me and he starts flirting with me. He's cute, so I flirt back a little. He steps a little closer. I back up. He steps towards me again. I step back. He steps closer a third time. Look, man, I don't fucking know you. Back the fuck off, I shouted. Man grabs me and forces me into the back seat. He starts kissing me and touching me. I see this little Indian woman in the store. She's hiding by the window, peeking over it. I'm screaming, "Help me! Help me!" The guy is just about to get it in. All of a sudden, I taste blood, and my ears are ringing. The rapist is dead. I push him off of me. I'm soaked in blood. I see this tall, built black man with a beard and dreadlocks standing there with a 9mm in his hand. The barrel is still smoking. My ears are still ringing. "Thank you," I cried, with tears in my eyes. I hear sirens, and the black guy takes off running. I found out who the rapist was, but I never found out who my hero was. That was the scariest fucking shit I've ever endured in my life. I was at the store. I had gone to get some soda and some party food. It was Super Bowl Sunday. As I'm walking back to my car, I see some guy peeping around the corner. I think nothing of it. I figured he was probably just some alcoholic or a homeless guy. I get in my car, and I am just about to put the key in the ignition. That same man runs up to my car and points his gun at me. "Move over, you fucking whore," he shouted. I am scared to death. I hear sirens, and the guy slams on the gas pedal. I'm freaking the fuck out. This guy is high on something. He's twitching and doing about 100 miles per hour down I-4, and there are like 20 cops behind us. I keep screaming, "Pull over, pull over." but he is determined to outrun the cops or get us killed, whichever comes first. The police are ramming the car. My fucking car! I scream. All of a sudden the tires go flat and the car flips over and kills the carjacker. I get rushed to the hospital and I have no serious injuries. I explain to the police what happened and the police department buys me a new car. I was grateful for the new car, but more grateful I didn't die.
So I was sitting on the couch in my living room with the sliding back door open. The cats can go in and out as they please, and a scraggly man walks up the deck and casually into my house. I didn't think much of him because all of my mom's friends are musicians and some look a bit worn. So I said hello, thinking he was here to pick up a guitar and drop something off. He said hey and asked what I was doing. I said, just eating a sandwich and watching TV, what's up? And he started talking about how a car was parked too close to something and in the way, like mumbling about a car situation that didn't make sense, or enough sense for him to have to walk inside my house without knocking to tell me. I knew none of our cars were too close to anything because they were parked behind our house, where they always were. I said something like, oh sorry, but those aren't my cars, so I can't move them. Then he said something like, never mind, it's okay, bye, and left. I didn't think much of it still, and brushed it off as one of my mom's friends or neighbors or something like that. I told my mom about it later, and she was immediately freaked out that some strange man just walked inside our house. She said none of our friends were coming by, and they would knock on the door first if they were. I am glad I was there to catch him off guard and not in the shower or sleeping, because I don't think he was expecting to see someone as soon as he walked inside. I don't know what he was planning on doing in my house, but let's not meet again, strange man that walked into my house. I grew up in a really bad part of town, full of crackheads, pill junkies, thieves, and general scumbags. I was always a smart child, and I had big plans for my future. It just turns out the Lord had other plans for me. Or maybe the temptation of the devil was too great. When I was 16 years old, my mom started dating this guy, Brad. She met at a 4th of July cookout in the neighborhood. This was before the neighborhood went to complete shit. Brad was really nice. After about 4 or 5 months, everything changed. Brad's friend, Marcus, got out of prison. And according to Brad, Marcus was trying to better himself and just needed to stay with us for a bit before he could get back on his feet. Marcus always made me feel uncomfortable. I do believe in second chances, and believe that most people do genuinely want to change when they get out of prison. But I didn't get that impression from Marcus. One day, when I was washing clothes, Marcus comes into the wash house and starts making inappropriate comments telling me that I have a nice ass, and how he wanted to fuck me right there in the wash house. I told him that I was only 16. He just said he didn't care. Marcus was like 43 years old. I told my mom about how Marcus was talking to me, and she just said, he is just trying to get used to being free again. He spent 10 years looking at nothing but men, so any woman is attractive to him right now. I have no idea why Mom was defending this guy. One night, when Brad was working the night shift at the mall as a security guard, I heard my mom screaming, and then I heard a loud smack. I run into my mom's bedroom, and Marcus is standing there naked with a knife in his hand. My mom was lying on the ground with a huge bruise on her face. She was in her nightgown. She was nervously trying to cover her private area. Marcus grabbed me by my hair and tried to rip my clothes off, but my mom pulled Brad's gun out of his nightstand and threatened to kill Marcus if he didn't leave. Marcus just laughed and called my mom a stupid bitch and told my mom, I gets what I want, bitch. I take mine. Think that gun scared me? Bet you ain't got what it take. No, but I do. It was Brad. He had a 9mm pressed to the back of Marcus' head. I should fucking kill you where you stand, you sick piece of shit, Brad threatened. Get the fuck out of here, Brad told Marcus. As Marcus was leaving, Brad walked outside and then I heard a gunshot. Then about 20 seconds later, I heard another, then another, again and again. Marcus lay on the ground bleeding out in the middle of the street as Brad stood over his body. Mom was screaming and crying as sirens were coming. She knew this was it. Marcus was shot over 15 times in the back and chest. Brad served 10 years in prison for assault with a deadly weapon. The DA wanted to charge him with attempted murder, but my mom testified against Marcus, and Marcus was sent to prison for 50 years for sexual battery and attempted rape. Mom and Brad got married and moved to another state after Brad was released from prison. So Marcus, you sick pervert bastard, let's never, ever meet again. So this happened in 1969, while my dad was 8 or 9. One night, both his parents were out of the house, along with his brother. This left him and his sister at home alone. Eventually the phone rings and my father picks it up with standard Canadian politeness. Hello, this is Bob. The person calling said that they were coming to kill both my father and his sister, and told them to leave the house. My father, slightly spooked, uses the intercom system to page his sister, telling her what happened. At the time, both children could drive, as they had been doing so on the farm, so leaving the house wasn't too much of a problem. While packing some things to leave, the phone rings again, and my father answers. Hello, this is Bob. The voice says, Why haven't you left yet? I'm coming to kill you. With which my father replies, Well, I'm trying to leave, but you keep on fucking calling. I can't leave when I have to keep answering the phone now, can I? Voice hangs up and my father and his sister drive to where their parents were having dinner. Nothing else happened with the voice. It was probably just a prank of some sort, and it didn't really faze my dad. On the night in question, my best friend, we'll call her Debbie, and I met at the Christmas market for some drinks. I invited Jay to join us, and he and Debbie got along very well. Too well, as it turned out. We went to a club in the red light district, and they were sucking face the entire night. So, dumb me gets wasted, drowning my sorrows and sulking. After a while, I got fed up and left on my own. I always think myself as quite street smart, and being 5'10" and growing up the youngest of 5 kids, I learned to defend myself if I had to. So I'm heading to the train station. It was about 4 a.m. at the time, passing all the clubs and dodging other drunken people. When I stopped for a second because I had the urge to be sick, as I'm bracing myself, I hear a man's voice. I look up and there's a taxi, and the driver was beckoning to me. He asked if I need a ride. Being the cheapskate I am, I decline. No charge, he says, and now comes the dumb part. I accepted. I was drunk, broken-hearted, and extremely mad that my friends hadn't come after me. So I threw caution to the winds and got in. The taxi driver was an unshaven, middle-aged man, and I think he said that he was from India originally. He introduced himself as Dave, and asked why I'm looking so sad, etc. I of course tell him the whole story, and he was very understanding. How about we get a drink at the gas station? My treat, he says to me. So we got some beers, and he says we can go to his flat and drink the beers because his shift had ended. And yes, I agreed to that. We listened to some music in the car and drank a beer until we arrived at his flat. He'd been drinking his beer at the wheel, and I thought that was weird, and shrugged it off. We pulled up to the block of flats where he lived, and I had absolutely no idea where we were. Anyway, we go up to his flat and he doesn't turn on the lights. Even though I could hardly see anything, my nostrils were assaulted by the stench of his flat. He maneuvered his way around the torch on his phone. I didn't want to seem impolite, so I sit down and he puts music on and lights frickin' candles. I start to sing along, and the whole time he was staring at me vividly. "I love your singing. I want to record it." Then things started to get weird. He rolled a joint and kept commenting how beautiful I was, and how much he wants to record my singing. I start to fidget, and send my other friends some messages explaining the situation. No answer from them. They were probably partying. Now Dave was really starting to creep me out, and I'm noticing more and more, even in the dim candlelight, that his flat was filthy. I start to panic, and funnily enough, for the first time that evening, I started to wonder what the hell I was doing. So I get out my phone and start taking selfies of us. Thank God for the front flash. And sending them to Snapchat to my friends, so they'd have some kind of idea what my murderer looked like. I had taken a selfie of us in the car over, without him noticing, so I also sent that to my friend. He got pretty pissed at that, and he rolled a second joint. I was getting extremely agitated. He said he'd drive me home after a few drinks, and now he was getting stoned. He kept rambling on about how I need a real man to treat me right, and to look after me, etc., etc. He asked me for my phone number, and because I had my phone in my hand, I gave it to him so as not to annoy him further. After about an hour of this, he was inching further and further towards me, and his bloodshot, horrible eyes were staring at me in an extremely uncomfortable way. I started to say that I didn't need to go home because I was tired. "Sleep here," he says. I was trying to be very polite and declined. He also asked who I was sending those pictures to which I answered that I had sent them to my friend. He said that he couldn't drive because he had been smoking. I told him I need to get home right now. He said he would drive me, trying to sound assertive and brave, though I didn't feel it. I also mentioned that my friend would be wondering what I'm doing and be worried, and I didn't want her freaking out and calling the cops. Wonder of wonders, it worked. We got into the car, and he doesn't speak. I made a video of us in the car pretending to be jamming out to music and sending it to my friend, just in case. He tried to make me give him my specific address so he could find it, but I just said the name of the closest bus stop. I get out of the car, thanked him for the ride and the drinks. "I'll call you. I still want to record your singing," he says. I waved and walked in the direction of my flat, and as soon as I was around the corner, I broke into a sprint until I reached my house and was safely at my flat. As you can imagine, my friends went batshit crazy when they heard how stupid I'd been and how easily he could have chopped me up into bits. He also called me, but he didn't send me a weird Happy New Year video. Moral of the story: don't get so drunk that you don't find it weird when a cab driver wants to take you home. If you are heartbroken and wasted and pissed off, just go home. So Dave, let's not meet again. Also, fuck you, Jay and Debbie. I met this girl in college, Shelly. We never really met eye to eye at all, but we tried to keep civil during classes. She came to college with a couple of friends, Kim and Leah. Me and Kim started dating shortly after starting college, and that's when things began to get weird. Shelly immediately tried to break me and Kim apart by the usual rumors and false accusations, including that I was only dating her to get sex, which wasn't the case at all. Me and Kim got along with the rest of our classmates, decided to keep her at arm's length. Even our tutors noted her behavior and brought her aside to tell her to stop. Even if me and Kim tried to complain to her directly, she would beg us to stop bullying her because she was epileptic and had learning difficulties. Obviously, her defense mechanisms to get people away from her that she didn't like. That's when things started to get strange. During our course, we were allowed to take an extracurricular activity. I chose photography and media editing, while Shelley and a few other female classmates took a child care course. It was during this point that I started to notice something strange. On a regular basis, I would see Shelley in town with friends. Now, these friends were mainly those with quite obvious learning difficulties. I knew a couple of them from college, but the people they were all associating with were clearly very young. I found out from Kim that during the last year of their secondary school education, Shelley took a child care course there, as well as doing some babysitting in her spare time to earn some money. At first, I didn't think much of it. She obviously spent a lot of time with young kids and teens, and it must have been normal for her. It didn't seem that odd at the time, but there was always this feeling in the back of my mind saying, there's something not right about this. I quickly dismissed it, and after a while, I forgot about it entirely, up until I got back in contact with some old school friends. My one friend, who I will name V, told me that Shelley was quite abusive and had a habit of being mean to people, especially young kids. Knowing what she was like from college, I just wrote this off as her being a mean bitch. Yet, even after several years following us all leaving college, I would see her hanging around town with very young people. After a while, Shelley got into a relationship with a fat idiot named Jay. Me and Jay have never spoken in person, but I found out that he threatened V's parents during a confrontation at a local cafe. One time I witnessed Jay yelling at Shelley in the middle of town, telling her she was stupid and an idiot. At this point, all my hatred for Shelley quickly disappeared, and I felt like slugging Jay in the head for threatening Shelley so badly, especially as she was obviously pregnant at the time. A couple of incidences followed, including Shelley tripping over a pothole while heavily pregnant. I know it made quite the stir in the local papers. Within days, the pothole was filled in by the local council. A year later, I got news that was both surprising and unsurprising. I heard a rumor in town that Shelley got arrested for child molestation. At first, I just laughed it off and thought it was just a harmless rumor from people who see her in town hanging around with young kids. Then, 6 months ago, she turned up in the paper again. The report said that she denied 11 charges of sexually assaulting 2 young girls. Reading that, it hit me like a brick. Everything made sense to me. The babysitting, child care course, hanging around with young kids, it just fit perfectly. I got the date with the impending court case and made a note of it. Several months later, the court case started, and I followed it intently on a website that shows the outline of court cases. Me, V, and her partner all met up during the court case and discussed what happened. V and her partner both thought she would be found guilty, while I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Innocent until proven guilty, and all that shit. During the week, it became obvious that it was a serious case. In the end, there were 7 witnesses that gave evidence against Shelley. The guilty verdict was read out. Shelley started crying as soon as the verdict was unveiled. In the reports, I read a sickening part of the case that shook me to my core. Shelley committed the crimes while asking the girls to play in a new game called Under the Bridge. After reading that, I felt physically sick. According to court transcripts, Shelley had such severe learning difficulties that she couldn't even defend herself during the court case and left all the work to her lawyer. She was obviously playing the "I'm disabled, don't bully me" card. She was due to be sentenced a few weeks ago, but apparently it was postponed by psychiatric reports. I just hope that the doctors that are investigating her can see through her bullshit. The worst thing that can come from this is that Shelley's child is still in her care by all accounts. Shelley, if I ever see you again, I hope it's with you behind bars. My dad owns a construction company, and during the summer I used to work there for some extra cash. Mostly my job was to clean and assist the supervisors with whatever they needed. It was hard work, with unbearably hot conditions due to Alabama summers, but it paid well and gave me something to do. I was the only female who worked there, and so it was not uncommon for creeps to mess with me. Currently, I am 24. This particular incident happened when I was 16, during the first year of working this job. Now, for those who don't know, construction companies usually have their own employed workers to oversee the construction, while other companies are hired to do specialty work such as electricity, plumbing, painting, etc. So the job site is filled with complete strangers who are there to do their job and then go home. They rarely try to strike up a conversation with you or even acknowledge your existence, well, most of the time. We were in the middle of building a 3-story high church. There were 2 stairways, and my job was to scrub all the steps down with a toothbrush. This was tedious, and the easiest thing to do was for me to just sit on the steps as I worked. This meant I was unintentionally out of sight, and I worked quietly. I'm about halfway down the stairs, and there's a landing at the halfway point where pipes and AC ducts are running through the walls. I could hear a man cursing to himself as he attempted to install a pipe. I could not see him yet, but I could hear him. I didn't give it a second thought and continued quietly working. As I scooted further down the stairs, the man noticed me. He begins to apologize, saying things like, "Oh, I didn't see you there. I'm sorry for my language. If I had seen you, I wouldn't have said that." I glance up and see what this guy looks like. He's obviously not one of our workers, but belongs to one of the other companies we had hired. He looks to be about in his 40s. I reassure him that it's fine and that I hear worse in school. He chuckles at this, and we both begin working again. He then starts to make small talk, asking which school I go to, how old I am, is one of the construction workers my dad, etc. I'm not in the mood for small talk, but I do my best to answer him politely, while also being very short with him, hoping he realizes I don't really want to be bothered. When I answered his question with my age, with "I'm 16, he looks intensely at me and says, "You're 16 and already married?" My mind immediately goes into what the fuck mode. Why would he think that that statement was a perfectly normal one to make, despite the fact that it had nothing to do with our conversation? He sees my confused expression and grins, clarifying, "Your ring." At the time, I had a silver band ring that I wore on my left finger, giving the appearance of a wedding ring. I simply wore it there because that's the finger it fit best. I'm immediately uncomfortable with how things are going. I'm at least 15 feet away from him, and he still somehow noticed that small ring on my finger. Him questioning me about marriage was already unsettling in itself. I'm a 16-year-old kid, and he's old enough to be my dad. I explain that it's not a wedding ring. He laughs at that and says, "All of us men should consider ourselves lucky then." I scrunch my face and unsure of what he means, or whether or not it's an insult. He explains, "Because you are still single, I mean." Officially uncomfortable, I turn back around and begin furiously cleaning the stairs and praying that this guy finishes what he's doing so I can leave. I refuse to move down the stairs any further until he is gone. I don't want to get closer to him. Several uncomfortable questions later, the guy seems to finish and leaves. I breathe in a sigh of relief and work on finishing the stairs. About 10 minutes later, the guy comes back with a cold bottle of Mountain Dew and holds it right in front of my face. I gingerly take it, and he says, "It's pretty hot in here. You look like you need it." "Thanks," I replied. He then goes back to working in the stairwell, while I just sit there and stare at my drink in my hand. It was strange. There's no electricity or AC in the building. This church is in the middle of nowhere. No gas stations or stores are close by. There's no vending machines out there either. It's toward the end of the day, so the ice in everyone's coolers has long since melted, and all their personal drinks are hot. Yet this Mountain Dew is as cold as ice. Cautiously, I open the bottle and quickly realize that the lid has already been cracked from someone opening it. They obviously tried to reclose it in an attempt to hide the fact that it'd been opened. I peer into the bottle to see something at the bottom of it. I quickly make the decision not to drink any of this. The guy has been watching me and questions why I haven't drank it yet. I just flat out ignore him and act like I didn't hear his question. Out of the corner of my eye, I realize that he hasn't brought any of his tools back with him, and that at first glance, he looks like he's working, but when I pay close attention, I see that he's not actually doing anything. He's just making the motions of doing work while watching me when he thinks I'm not looking. He keeps insisting I have some of the drink because it's so hot, and I look like I'm going to overheat. When he is unable to get a response from me, he changes tactics and attempts small talk again, while I frantically try to think of how to get out of this situation. This part of the building is completely deserted. It's when I choose to clean those stairs first, so I wouldn't have to work around the other workers. The chances of someone walking through are non-existent. You're working here with your dad, right? Who's your dad? A maniacal grin spreads across his face as I realize he is just giving me a way out. I answer, Calvin, the owner of this construction business. His face turns pale, and in a reedy voice says, "Oh, the big boss, huh?" He quickly decides he has somewhere else to be. He didn't attempt to interact with me for the rest of the day, but I did catch him staring intently at me whenever we were in the same room. I threw away the Mountain Dew. So, creepy guy who tried to give me the Mountain Dew, let's...
Alright, if you enjoyed the video, go ahead and like, share, subscribe, share on Facebook, share on Twitter, share on Instagram. I don't give a shit where you share it, just share it. Thank you for watching.